Hey, what's up, guys? Rare Bishop here of the Press A to Listen podcast, and we have another video review for you, this time around for The Crew, developed by Ivory Tower, published by Ubisoft. This is a racing game that has seen its fair share of open betas and closed betas over the last year and a half. It was due to come out earlier this spring, it never got delayed to later this year, then it got delayed to November. So the game is finally out, people are finally able to pick it up, and we're just going to jump right into the review right now. For those unfamiliar with The Crew, it is a racing game where you travel, essentially the whole United States. They take some inspiration mainly from the United States of America. Some areas look similar to the actual real-life representation. Some of it does not at all. They have to make it a video game, so they can't make the whole entire United States, because that would take an insane amount of time, and that game would literally never come out. But the map size itself, just to get into that real quick before we get into the gameplay, is relatively big. Granted, driving in this game from Miami to Las Vegas, they say is about 69, 70 miles. Obviously, in the real world, that's not the case. It takes way longer than that, but again, it's a video game. They have to try to make it a little bit fun and try to make it to where you're not spending 2, 3, 4 hours driving across the country. But the map size itself, and you'll see it in this video, is relatively big. You can go to the East Coast to New York. You can go to the West Coast to Los Angeles, San Francisco. You can go down south to Miami, New Orleans. And of course, you start in the Midwest, you start in Detroit. So the map is relatively big. There's plenty of stuff to do. There's story missions. There are what they call these skills, which are challenges basically out in the world. So you'll be driving along a road, you'll go through one, and it'll be like, see how far you can make this jump, and you get a bronze, silver, or gold, so you're rated on that. You can compare leaderboard scores with friends. Some of them are stay on this racing line and see how long you can do that. Again, you get ranked on that. And another one is, go as fast as you can, but stay on the road. If you go off the road, you don't get any points. So they have those in the environment, so when you're driving, it doesn't feel like you're just bored and you're just driving straight to a destination. They kind of mix it up and give you these skills throughout. But yeah, 5 different regions. You have East Coast, Midwest, the South, the Mountain States, and then the West Coast. My main issue with the 5 regions is the way they incorporate the story missions, which the story is basically set up to where you're trying to infiltrate this 510 crew to get your ink, to try to figure out you're an undercover cop. You're trying to infiltrate it to figure stuff out for your department. And the way they have the story missions set up are you do a group of missions in one region. You unlock a car tuner, which we'll get into in a minute, in the next region. And then you go to that region, you do the missions, and so on and so forth. So none of the story missions require you to drive from the West Coast to the East Coast. They have those missions in the game, but they're not in the story. They're optional, kind of side missions that you do. And that's kind of disappointing. I was kind of hoping one of the missions would be chase this guy, from the West Coast to the East Coast or something like that. And they just don't do that. It's just stay in this region, then move on to the next. Stay in this region, then move on to the next. So that was disappointing for me. And just the story itself is very predictable. It's not something that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat or keep you second guessing. It's kind of like a low budget Fast and the Furious knockoff movie. So if anyone's seen the Fast and the Furious movies, they know how crazy and over the top that is. It's not that crazy and over the top, so it's like a low budget one where they can only do so much, and that's about all they do. The best thing about the story itself are the cutscenes, the CGI cutscenes. Other than that, there's no reason to really keep track of the story. It's kind of convoluted, it's a mess, and like I said, by you get to the end, you can pretty much predict whatever's going to happen. Now, before we get into the gameplay, I touched on the missions very briefly about how you go from, stay in one region, then go to the next, stay in one, and go in the next. The missions themselves are kind of hit or miss. The race types that they have, the race missions, I think are fine. They're race types or something you see in almost every racing game. But where they try to mix it up is they have these takedown missions that you have to try to track down this truck or this car, and it has a health bar over it. It can have 75 health. It depends on where you're at in the story. And the goal is to, take down his health and take that car down. The problem with that is the AI is so atrocious in this game that you'll get right up next to the car, and as soon as you get behind it, the car will just take off. And so you end up wasting a significant amount of time, which hurts your score, hurts your medal time, but then also hurts your progress in the story because you're having to retry this mission over and over, even with some of the fastest cars in the game. It just seems like the rubber banding on the AI is just not very good. In takedown missions and in the race type missions, there'll be times where you'll feel like you're way ahead of a racer or the second, third place driver, and then the second and third place driver all of a sudden are just in your rear view mirror 30 seconds later. So they don't do a very good job of, and I understand you got to try to make a challenge. You don't want it to be too easy, but at the same time, you can't make the rubber banding of the AI that difficult, because what ends up happening is people get frustrated, they get annoyed, they get aggravated, and then they move on to another game that doesn't have that significant of a rubber banding of AI. And I know this is The Crew, it's not Forza, but Forza Horizon 2, and I may have been spoiled by their Drivatar system, but being able to incorporate what actual drivers and what actual players are doing is the best way to handle AI, because you're not rubber banding. You're taking the people that are playing in the game, you're taking their skill into account, and that's how you should handle it. I understand that that's not what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make a regular racing game with their AI, but I just think that the way they handle it and incorporate it is just not very good at all. Now, the gameplay and the controls, it's a typical racing game. Right trigger goes, left trigger brakes, X is yours, your E-brake and stuff like that. The problem with the way the controls work are the cars. I guess not even the controls, it's the cars themselves. Whether you're in a Ford F-150 or a Dodge Ram, or you're in one of the high-end cars like a Lamborghini, they don't have a big difference to them. Even when you're leveled all the way up, you get parts that you get throughout the game. When you level up, you get parts that will give you increased braking and increased acceleration and increased speed. But it doesn't feel like that actually impacts the car at all. Because I'll drive a Lamborghini, and it'll feel this kind of like it has the same weight to it as a Dodge Ram. Like it sticks to the ground. It's not as loose as you figure a Lamborghini would be, and that's not something that I find to be particularly fun. When you get the money and the credits to buy these upper end, high end exotic cars, you expect them to be a little different, and I just don't. I didn't experience that with my time with the game. Now, when you unlock certain cars like the Ram or the Lamborghini or a Mustang or anything like that, you go to car tuners to change what type of car it is. There are 5 different what they call specs in the game. There's a street, there's dirt, there's raid, there's performance, and then there's circuit. And these will kind of change up the cars a little bit. Obviously, if you're in a street car, it's going to go way faster than a dirt car. Obviously, though, if you're in a dirt car, it's going to go faster and handle a little bit better on dirt than a street car will. And the 5 regions come into play when it comes to those specs as well, because each region has a different car tuner. So Midwest will have the street, East Coast will have the dirt, and so on. So they kind of make it to where to go to each region, you need to change up your car tuner a little bit, change up what you're driving. And so they do try to mix it up a tad with some of the specs of the cars. Now let's talk about the actual servers and the load times and connections and stuff like that, because for those who don't know, this is a game that requires you to be constantly connected to play it. That means even if you decide to play the game solo, so if you want to play the whole game by yourself, you don't want to get in a crew, you still have to be connected to the internet. So don't think you can come in here and play solo and you'll be fine. The good thing about the connections in the server so far is obviously they had at least 3 or 4 betas for this game. The connections for themselves have been relatively stable. I had 2 disconnects on the first day. Since then, I've had no disconnections from the servers. The initial load into the game, so when you first boot up the game, you hit continue or new game, that takes a little bit of time. That can take upwards of 2 to 3 minutes. But once you're in, you're not going to really get disconnected. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but with not as many people playing this compared to other games that require you to be connected, like Titanfall or like Destiny or anything like that, you're not going to have too big of a problem staying connected. So at least at the moment, at least the servers and the connections hold up well. And of course, I mentioned you can do all the missions you solo if you want, but the main draw of the game is obviously the title of the game, The Crew. They want you to build a crew of up to 4 people. You can do 2 to 4 if you want. You can do the whole game in co-op, so you have that option if you have some friends who want to pick it up or something like that. And if you don't have any friends, they have a quick co-op option. So whenever you go up to a mission, you have the option of quick co-op, you have the option of solo. And quick co-op will basically, it'll bring up a prompt for the other players in the game that say, hey, so-and-so has invited you to a co-op game. Would you like to join? And they have the option to join you or not. And so it gives you the ability to try out the multiplayer for yourself, or the co-op anyway for yourself. Multiplayer we'll get into a little bit. So it gives you that option, and I think it's done well. It's not, you don't sit in a loading screen, you don't sit at a menu. Once it's trying to connect you to the co-op, and when it's trying to connect you to actual PvP races, you can go out there and do some skill-based challenges that we mentioned earlier and stuff like that, and it'll do that on the fly. It'll do it while you're still playing the game. And the crew missions themselves, so if you do them in co-op, they make some of them a little easier. If you're doing those takedown missions that I talked about, the car you're required to take down might get a little bit more health since there's more players involved in the event. but you have multiple people involved in the event now, so it makes it a little easier to get him. Instead of having one car go after him, you have 2, 3, or 4 cars going after him. So it does make some of the events a little easier. Now the game does have actual PvP races, so if you want to go against people in a checkpoint race, you can do that. The problem with that is not a lot of people are playing the PvP, and understandably so. They want to experience the vast array of the map and the story missions and do some of the crew co-op missions and stuff like that. But you can do that. It takes a little long to matchmake, but again, while you're matchmaking, you can go do some of the skill challenges or right around the whatever state you're in and stuff like that. The PvP missions, they handle like regular race events in other racing games. You go from checkpoint to checkpoint. When you're done, you select your car, you do it next. And so it's not anything that stands out. That's definitely not why you would want to play this game, but it is there for those that want to experience it. And with that, that's going to just about do it for the Crew video review. I hope you guys enjoyed. If I had to recommend this game, I would not recommend it at the full $60 price because I just don't feel the gameplay itself is very fun. Like I said, I think the way they handle some of the mission structure is not well done. There's a lot of ambition behind this project, and I fully commend them for that. But I just don't feel like anything in the game is well executed on. The only thing that I really enjoy are the skill-based challenges, which you can do without even touching some of the story mode. You can just go drive around the whole country and do that. And I think that's probably the best part of the game. The other part is at least the servers and the connections hold up. With this year being full of broken games and having to have multiple patches, at least this game works week 1, and that's something you haven't really been able to say from the last few weeks of releases. But I wouldn't suggest it at $60. I just don't find it that fun. I find it very boring. The story's very predictable. Like I said, some of the cars, they don't feel like they're different enough for you to actually switch out of one to another, and I just don't feel it's worth the full price. So hope you guys enjoyed. I recommend you buying it when it's on a sale. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.